Hey everybody, I'm Benjamin, aka The Terrible Australian of Supermarsy.com, and welcome to my video review of My Big Fat Greek Wedding 2, which of course is the sequel to the 2002 Oscar-nominated sleeper hit, My Big Fat Greek Wedding. So let's get right into it. Now, I should say before I get into my review of the sequel, I should say my quick thoughts on the first one and all that. I have to say, it's been a while since I have seen the first one, but I did remember really enjoying it a lot, and I thought it was a decent, nicely made and humorous sort of indie comedy, and which had a likable cast, and it was an enjoyable film. Like, it wasn't the greatest film of all time, but I can definitely, sort of looking back on it now, it's sort of, I can see why that movie sort of became sort of the big surprise hit that it did. It just sort of was a film that, you know, in a lot of ways, that a lot of people could relate to on some level, about families and relationships and all the stuff sort of comes along with it. Even if whether you have a Greek heritage or not, there were things in that film that you could find relatable, and that's what I thought was one of the things that sort of was the key success that made the first film as big as it was. So when it came time for the sequel, which has come out 14 years after the release of the first one, I was sort of in two kind of frames of mind about it, because I wasn't sure whether this is going to be one of the, like, more of a sort of, when the Vardalos was going to go for who created the first film, whether this is going to be like a sort of before sunset type of situation where we kind of follow the characters many years later and see where they are in their lives at the moment and what's been going on. Or is this basically, you know, like most sequels, going to be a cash grab that kind of, you know, is kind of capitalizing on the nostalgia of the original. And now, having seen the sequel now, I will say it's definitely not as good as the first one. In fact, I would say it's kind of an average sequel. Like, to me, what sort of didn't make this film work for me was basically it kind of sort of rehashes some elements from the first film, and kind of, I mean, there is a wedding at the heart of it, particularly because with Vardalos' character, Tula's parents, who in the film played by Michael Constantine and Elena Kazan, in the film they find out that they're not actually legally married, and so they have to. Tula and her brothers, her sister, and their cousins and all that, and aunties and uncles, they sort of all decide to organize a wedding for them, and of course all the complications that follow from that, particularly where sort of Elena Kazan character is kind of debating whether she wants to get married to a husband after all these years, and all that type of stuff. That, to me, they're sort of Michael Constantine and Lenny Kazan's characters are the sort of the main thrust of this story, as particularly with this subplot of the story. And at the same time, you got this other subplot which involve the character of Tula's Nia Vardalos and John Corbett's characters' relationship with their young daughter, who is kind of struggling in high school, mainly because that she's kind of embarrassed by her Greek heritage, particularly with her family and whatnot, and she wants to do anything she can to have nothing to do with that at all. And so you got these two main sort of plots, and sort of the wedding subplot is kind of takes up most of the bulk of the film, and to me it kind of just felt like at some ways kind of a rehash of elements from the first film, and I kind of wish there was more sort of development with the subplot with the daughter, because I thought, okay, this is an interesting subplot right here, but unfortunately the movie does explore it, but you kind of feel like it's a bit underdeveloped as well. And of course, there's sort of like the film kind of rehashes, like I said, it kind of rehashes like sort of scenes and moments and other aspects from the first film again, and it doesn't really sort of, you know, bring anything new to the table. And I can understand why they kind of took the more of the safe route in terms of this film, especially since, like I said, it has been 14 years since the release of the first film. So I guess instead of doing something a bit more crazier, a bit more original with the plot, they sort of rehash the first film's plot again in a lot of ways. So unfortunately, that's what kind of sort of stopped the film for me from being as good as it was. And of course, some of the humor, while there were a lot of jokes in the film, I did have a giggle at and whatnot. But a lot of the time, some of the jokes kind of felt like they sort of belong in sort of a TV sitcom as well, and some of them kind of fell flat. But that being said, though, even though it is kind of an average sequel overall, I will say this, though. I thought the cast were still pretty solid, and particularly, with Nia Vardalos, John Corbett, Lainie Kazan, Michael Constantine, Andrea Martin, and many others. They all sort of come back to reprise their roles in this film, and I thought they all did pretty solid work. Some better than others, of course, but I thought for most part they sort of were able to recapture what their characters from the first film, and of course and it's harmless. Like it's like I said, it's, even though it is an average film, it's not a bad film in any way. Like, it's a harmless film. It's definitely a film that, like, it's not one that you can go out to the cinema and see, but this is kind of one you can just watch on a sort of a lazy Sunday afternoon with the family and whatnot. And it's a harmless, inoffensive film, and in that way, it's fine because this is a film aimed for families as well. So, in that regard, like, it is a reasonably enjoyable film, and there are some witty moments, but I feel like they could have done more with it, and in the end, like, even though there are some good qualities in it, unfortunately, it just, some aspects of the story were just, some aspects of the film were just kind of bland and kind of unoriginal. So yeah, that's, if I had to rate My Big Fat Greek Wedding 2, I give it a solid 2.5. Like I said, it's a harmless, inoffensive film that's watchable, but as a film overall, it's just kind of average and a bit bland. So, yep, that's the end of my video review of My Big Fat Greek Wedding 2. I hope you guys all enjoyed it, and I'll see you all later. See you everyone. Bye.